Mr. President, we've got so many elements of the bill that's under consideration now. The Drive Act. It's enjoyable to talk about it because yesterday we talked about the transparency, the fact that we have a way that the public can know every dime. I was watching as the occupier of the chair was giving a presentation on waste in government. This is not a case. If all government agencies had the transparency that we're going to have in the Drive Act, where everyone's going to know on a day-to-day basis the progress of every bridge, every highway that's being done, the renovations, then we wouldn't be having that problem. We're doing it right. And I have to always, I look at these different parts of the bill. That it's so big. You could talk for a long period of time about it. Yesterday we went over not all of the bridges, the deficient bridges in the country, but quite a few of them. And when people stop and realize that people die unnecessarily because of the deficiency of our bridges, it's a serious thing. But one of the parts of this bill that people are not aware of as much as they should be is the freight section of the bill, transporting freight around. We talked about the history of this. We talked about the fact that the first bill that came along for a transportation reauthorization bill back in 1956 was primarily for military purposes. Now we realize the deficiency we are compared to China, compared to other countries in not keeping up our highway system. But today, the national highway system carries more than 55% of the nation's highway traffic and 97% of the truck freight traffic. Of the 4 million miles of public roads, the national highway system represents 5.5% of the nation's most heavily traveled miles of roads. Now, that's 5% is carrying 97% of the freight. Americans depend on the well-maintained national highway system that provides critical connections between urban and rural communities. American businesses can pay an estimated $27 billion a year in extra freight transportation costs due to the poor condition of public roads, the increase in shipping delays, the raising prices on everyday products. Recognizing that it's the foundation of the nation's economy and the key to the nation's ability to compete in the global economy, it is essential that we focus efforts to improve freight movement on the national highway system. You know, in all the bills, and I've been involved in 6 of these over the years, we've never really singled out freight to be addressed. And yet, there's no one in here who hasn't gone down the roads, the highways, and you see the congested traffic, and we see the trucks that are idling over here, and everyone and being late, and the cost. There's a tremendous cost to that. Well, the Drive Act includes 2 new programs to help the states deliver projects that promote the safe, efficient, and reliable transportation of consumer goods and products. The first new program is the National Freight Program. The National Freight Program is distributed by a formula that will provide funds to all states to enhance the movement of goods, reduce costs, and improve the performance for businesses. It's kind of interesting because when one of the good features about a transportation system and the way we've been doing it with the transportation reauthorization bill is that we rely on the states to decide what their priorities are. You know, this infinite wisdoms in Washington, they think they know more than we know in the states. That's not true at all. So this is one of the rare areas where we go to the states and say, look, you guys, you decide what you think your priorities are in Indiana or in Oklahoma, and so we have a formula to address that. But the problem with that is when you get to moving freight, then they don't have that as a high priority because most freight moves through a state, and they don't consider that to be a local problem. They're more concerned about passenger cars, and so it doesn't appear. Well, it does appear now. So we have the first new program, the National Freight Program, is a different type of formula, and it addresses the movement of freight through states. The program will expand flexibility for both rural and urban areas to designate key freight corridors that match the regional movement of goods on roads. It will improve the efforts to identify projects with a high return on investment through state freight plans and state advisory committees. Now, the second program is the Assistance for Major Projects program. And it creates a competitive grant program to provide funds to major projects of high importance to the community, to the region, and to the nation. The program includes a set-aside for rural areas and ensures an equitable geographic distribution of funds. The program includes strong transparency provisions and provides for a congressional selection and approval process for projects identified by the Department of Transportation as vital to our national interests. These new freight programs will only exist if the DRIVE Act is enacted. That's what we're talking about now, the DRIVE Act. And it will be enacted by Congress, I'm very confident. I can't imagine, by the way, that people not listening to the people back home. Right now, if you go back to any of the states, I don't care what state it is, and you talk to the departments of transportation, the State Department of Transportation, and they'll have not just the road builders, the suppliers, but the people that drive on the roads. It is the most popular thing in America. And I can't imagine having the opportunity to have a 6-year program and any justification for voting against it. And so I think it's time that we become innovative and forward-thinking in how the federal program is using tax dollars to responsibly partner with the states to improve the national highway system. And the DRIVE Act is the answer. You had something that... Yeah, do you have a chart on the okay. Oh, yeah, Fort Lee, New Jersey. The George Washington Bridge connects Fort Lee, New Jersey to New York City. It's the second worst freight bottleneck by congestion index in the nation. The average speed slows to 29 miles an hour. Rush hour speeds in the morning and evening slow to below 15 miles an hour. The nearby I-95 Cross Bronx Expressway is the most congested corridor in the country. The morning southbound commute is considered the worst of the worst in the country. The George Washington Bridge is the busiest motor vehicle bridge. Well, that's what we're looking at. Yesterday we were looking at what was the name of the bridge in New York? That was the Brooklyn Bridge, wasn't it?
Yes.
That was the one where some of us in this in here are old enough to remember the old Tarzan movies. Do you guys remember that? You see the reruns? Yeah, Johnny Weissmuller was his name. He had a lot of muscles. He was a real strong guy. And one of the movies was Tarzan's New York Adventures. In that movie, he was being chased around the Brooklyn Bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge was built in 1983, and it was, for a design life of 60 years. And here we are today. We still have the Brooklyn Bridge. Anyway, he crawled up in the top, and they're chasing him the cops were chasing him with guns and all that, and he dived off. And every time I drive over that bridge, I think I'm going to be diving off there if the thing would collapse. Then we have the Houston, Texas bridge. Do we have something there? Yeah, the Houston, Texas is the home of 5 of the top 20 freight bottlenecks in the nation. Texas is it's the home of 9 of the top 25 freight bottlenecks cost freight industry in Texas, some $671 million a year. That's just in Texas, the bottlenecks, and 8.8 million hours of delay. I-45 at US 59 is ranked 3rd by congestion index. I-45 at US 610 north is ranked 15. Average speed slows to 39 miles an hour. Morning and evening rush hours, it drops way below that. And look at it. You can see that that is the problem. Well, that's why this is a very important part of this of the bill that is before us now. So I think we have an opportunity, and we have to sometimes remind people that what doesn't work. What doesn't work is short-term fixes or short-term extensions of previous bills that were passed. The last one that we passed was 2005. It was a 5-year bill. It expired at the end of 2009. And at that time, we should have started another one, and another transportation reauthorization bill, but we didn't do it. So we had short-term extensions. There's a guy named Gary Ridley out in Oklahoma who's recognized nationally, and he's been here testifying several times before us as a national real scholar. He really understands transportation. He's done an analysis. He says that if we'll look at the 33 short-term extensions that we operated under in this, right here in America, after 2009 and before this bill, it costs about 30% off the top. Now, I think it's important for a lot of people here because sometimes there are rating organizations that will say, well, we're going to oppose a bill because it's a big spending bill. Sure, it's a big spending bill. You know, that old war document called the Constitution says what we're supposed to be doing here, defending America in bridges and roads. And so that's what this is all about. And we're going to be doing it. But for conservative groups to say that we don't want to support this bill, they have dropped short of understanding the fact that the alternative is to have short-term extensions, and that costs 30% off the top. The conservative position is to pass a funded highway reauthorization bill. I know that a lot of people would be talking about devolution. I can talk about this because going back 25 years ago, at that time, a guy named Connie Mack, who is a House member and later a senator from Florida, he and I were the fathers of devolution. You didn't know that, did you? We're the ones who introduced the devolution bill. The idea sounded so good on the stump because you can say, well, we just repeal all the federal taxes and make state taxes out of them. Well, it doesn't quite work that way because you can't do that. If you repeal a federal tax, then you have to pass a state tax. Now, how many people here are naive enough to believe that all 48 contiguous states would be willing to pass a sizable state tax increase? It's not going to happen. And so that's why the national highway system is so important. That's why Eisenhower started this thing back in 1956. Because we have friends, my friends up in Wyoming. There are very few people in Wyoming, but there are a lot of roads. And that's part of our national highway system. Now, if you did this, if you did a devolution project, they would have to pass a 48-cent per gallon gasoline tax increase in Wyoming. And so it's not going to happen, and we know that's not going to happen, and we're not going to have a uniform system unless we do it with this. And the opportunity we have now is the DRIVE Act. I know that the House has made some statements that they want to do a 5-month extension. Well, see, there we go again, another short-term extension. And the reason for this, I guess, is that they want to get to the year's end and then couple that because of the popularity of a highway bill with some of the tax changes that are going to be set to be changed to take place at the first of this coming year. So I know that some of my friends, because I've talked to them over in the House, have said, well, we want a short-term bill because we don't think you're going to pass a long-term bill in the Senate. Well, when they find out we are going to pass a long-term bill in the Senate and we are going to pass this bill, then that changes things. So I look forward to that, to the opportunity to get this passed and get it passed in a timely fashion. By the way, we have to keep in mind we are on a deadline. The deadline is at the end of this month. The Highway Trust Fund runs out of money at that time. So that's why it's important that we get this passed. And I do have a request for a UC. Mr. President, I have 9 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during the day's session in the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and the minority leaders. I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and that these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection.
And, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate recess from 12:30 until 2:15, and at that time during the recess, count post-cloture on the motion to proceed to H.R. 22.
Without objection.
With that, all right, and with that, then, the hour of, well, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a
The
quorum.
clerk will call the roll.